This is Soccer Devils, the athletic show dedicated to Manchester United. Coming up today, we reflect on another week of deepening analysis, assessment, speculation for Ruben Amorim and Manchester United. There's, of course, a huge game to build up to as United face Sunderland at Old Trafford on Saturday. And there's a stadium update, foreign friendly plans, and also we'll answer more of your questions on the show as well. I'm in New Century, which is where we'll be holding our live show in Manchester in November. Tickets now sold out for this venue. Carl Anker's also here, over there. Morning, Carl.
Morning, Ian.
Yeah, it's a bit bizarre, but this is how we're doing the setup. Andy and Laurie are also with us as well. How are you doing?
Very good, thank you, guys. You're looking absolutely splendid. What a venue.
It is a great venue. We've already been discussing the cocktails for November as well, Laurie.
Perfect,
you'll be pleased to know.
Yeah,
I think the guys here, Cody and his team, have got a few things up the sleeves, so that sounds great. Just a reminder then, tickets are on sale and time is running out to get them for our shows in October. Belfast is sold out, but there's Dublin at Vicar Street on October the 13th. Tickets still available for that. And Cork at the Opera House the day after on the 14th of October. And remember, there's also London after our Manchester show, which is on November the 11th at Soho Theatre in Walthamstow. So get involved. They're always brilliant nights. It'll be lovely to see you there. And thank you to everyone who's bought a ticket so far. Brian, thank you, Brian, has got in touch to say he's listening to the latest podcast, eagerly anticipating the live show in Dublin next week. Manchester United will announce Amorim's sacking just before the show, I'm sure, Brian says, which I don't know about that. But there has been a little bit of history of managerial changes just before the live shows, so it is certainly a situation to keep an eye on, and we'll talk about all of that a little bit later on. But Laurie, you're only with us for a short time, and there's a good reason why, because you've written two stories this week which we need to get into. The first one, new Old Trafford, might look different. Explain, please.
Yeah, I'm a bit disappointed that the editors didn't go with my headline suggestion, which was "Can No P." NO in capital letters, Carl's.
I can see why they're
dying inside there. Yeah, sorry about that. But yeah, so it was just an update really on the stadium because, it was back in March, wasn't it, that Sir Jim Ratcliffe and Sir Norman Foster unveiled these sort of grand plans and, attracted a lot of controversy. We discussed it on the podcast, didn't we, in terms of the canopy, should we call it? The vast umbrella was what Foster termed it. A circus tent is what other people called it. And the development, as far as I'm aware, is that there's actually been plans now drawn up that don't feature the canopy because there is an ongoing issue with Freightliner, which is the company that owns a lot of the land sort of around Old Trafford, which United need to buy to be able to construct such a large-scale new stadium with this canopy feature. And so I think it's something like £400 million Freightliner are asking for. United value the land something like 50 million. So there's a huge discrepancy in terms of the actual pricing structure. Now, for example, Andy Burnham, who's the Greater Manchester Mayor, he says that there's obviously ways that United can perhaps compulsory purchase that land, and there's a government involvement there. But I think this sort of contingency is being drawn up in the prospect of that not being the case, and also looking at whether that would be a quicker solution to getting a new Old Trafford. So I think it's a really fascinating development because it shows that as we perhaps suspected at the time, you've got these kind of big plans, you want to put them out there, get people perhaps manifesting it if that is your intention. But the reality is biting a little bit. And, we're 6 months on from that point. And I think having to look at different potentials for a new stadium, it just shows where they're at with it, really. And even, the whole financing for the stadium is something to be considered as well amid all that. But yeah, I think the fact that the canopy was such a big feature of the plans when they were presented, and like I say, caused quite a bit of discussion around, shall we say. I think the fact that they're actually now as one alternative, and I'm not saying they've decided anything on this at all, but one alternative being without a canopy, I think is a notable development.
Yeah, Andy, it has been quiet for a while since the meeting and the plans were announced 6 months ago, like Laurie says. So how do you react to this, that actually one of the biggest features of the plans that was announced that potentially will go? I mean, I guess they were only ever initial thoughts and visions, but it's quite a big change.
It's a big change, and it divided supporters who were sort of getting their head around the prospect of leaving Old Trafford. I think there were quite a lot of favourable comments to it, and a lot of people going, whoa, this, people who had a beef with United were describing it as looking like a circus tent. The main issue, I think, is how's this going to be funded? We still don't know how the stadium's going to be funded. And everyone's putting the little angles in. I saw the Liverpool Echo last week saying that a Liverpool-based company has bought the land close to Old Trafford. It's not really true, but you can see what they're getting at, you know, a Liverpool company stopping a new Old Trafford being built. And the company who acquired Freightliner, they're not from Liverpool, but they have a head office in Liverpool. So that's just a local slant being put on it. But as Laurie says, there's a huge discrepancy in the price of the land, which is important should a new stadium be built. And the nightmare scenario is that they hold Manchester United to some form of ransom. But I remember speaking to Andy Burnham about this, and he was telling me that we'll give all the help that we can to Manchester United. And I felt his help was to do with the land, so that compulsory purchase or whatever, which is close to where a new stadium would be. I think that the Burnham, etc., would do all they can.
Yeah, how do you see this playing out, Laurie? Could this be positioning to try and put a bit of pressure on to get this deal over the line for the land, potentially?
I mean, when I was discussing this with various people, I sort of said that, you know, I think anybody would really want this story coming out, because you can see it as a bit embarrassing in one way, because you had these, you know, large scale ideas and now 6 months on, nothing's happened really, and you're having to maybe, you know, climb back from that. But as you say there, if that's put out there into the public domain, and it seems that United do have an alternative, you know, maybe Freightliner, you know, readjust their, you know, price bracket. And as Andy says, you know, they are, I think, in the process of being taken over by another company. So do they have different mindset to it all as well? I just think it shows, I don't know what happens really, because there's just so many things that have to fall into place for United to actually be able to enact this. Some people that I speak to that I think have got a pretty good grip of things would perhaps even dispute or question, doubt maybe whether a new stadium will even happen, because it's almost like Ratcliffe at the time, back in March, wanted to, as you say earlier, Ian, put these concepts out there to get the government support, but they still need this government support to be able to do the whole new sort of, what do they call it, the district around the stadium, you know, which is what really Ratcliffe wants. He doesn't just want a new stadium. So there's big, you know, question marks around how it all gets funded. I don't know. I think you get to a point though where they're going to have to make a call, because, you know, when we spoke to the architect back at the time at Foster and Partners, they were saying they ideally wanted to sort of start work on this year. So we're already into October. So, you know, we're getting on, you know, in time really. And I don't think they can kind of keep delaying or kind of having these negotiations forever. So they're going to have to make a call at some point in the near future, I think. Otherwise you might hit a point where it gets a bit of a limbo or stasis really.
Yeah, okay. Well, it won't be the last time that we talk about stadium plans, I'm sure, and we await, you know, further updates on that. Let's talk about something that's brand new this season, which is the potential for friendlies during the campaign, which is very unusual. I don't think it's happened before, certainly not in modern times for Manchester United. Andy might correct me on this, but...
I was going to correct you there, actually, Ian.
Oh, were you? When's it happened?
Well, I was listening to the fantastic podcast on the fan atmosphere at Old Trafford, and Andy mentioned very briefly a friendly in 1988. Was it, Andy, against AC Milan?
Is that recent? I'm sorry. I was
so you just purely meant... Okay, sorry.
In modern terms, yeah.
Yeah.
Andy, is 1988 modern terms?
So United played in Saudi in 2008. 15 of us went. You couldn't get visas then. We pretended...
What, for a mid-season friendly?
Yeah.
Is this when Danny Welbeck missed that penalty?
Correct.
Was that a friendly, was it? I didn't have in my head that was a friendly.
And for those who said this is really harmful, well, Manchester United won the European Cup a few months later. Right, so 60,000 there. You couldn't get visas into Saudi. It's not like now the country didn't want visitors, outsiders coming. Fortunately, 15 of us acquired jobs as engineers for a large multinational beverage company and arrived in Saudi Arabia as representatives of this company. And when we filled in our occupation and religion, Barmy Kev, who's a well-known United fan, just put religion, Manchester United. We went. We were treated really well by the supporters there. It was against a huge club, 60,000 people there. We just found a real enthusiasm for United. Got a lift off some fans from the centre of Riyadh out to the stadium. But there's been quite a lot of mid-season friendlies. I mean, only during the World Cup, United played in Cadiz a couple of years ago.
Yeah,
against Real Betis as well.
I may have been a bit hasty, probably saying that they haven't done it much in modern terms, but I mean, the World Cup was probably an exceptional circumstance. I didn't realise that the 2008 game was a mid-season friendly. I remember clearly Danny Welbeck missing the penalty at the death at a time when he was coming through and people wanted to see him being given minutes and given a chance. But let's go back to the foundation of this story and why Andy's just told that incredible tale about getting into Saudi Arabia and watching a football game. Laurie, what's the story here? So United looking at the potential for playing mid-season friendlies to try and boost the coffers, basically, I guess.
Yeah, well, obviously they've been hit, haven't they? Not least by not making it into Europe. I think we calculated at something like 85 million they would have been able to get through European competition had they beaten Spurs in the Europa League final. So I guess that's Champions League. That's a minimum, really, to be fair. And then you throw in, the fact that they went out of the Carabao Cup, to Grimsby at the first round. That gives them 3 midweeks and, money to make up, really. And for all this sort of transfer spend that they've had in the summer, we do know that they are, tight finances and all for all this record revenue. The fact that they still are making a loss. We can get into the rights and wrongs of that, I suppose, but ultimately they feel that they need to perhaps claw some of that back. And so does a friendly, and we've had a few reports of this. We've had a few sort of murmurings of friendlies being thought of, but I think the Saudi Arabia link this is the first time that's been put out there. And I suppose, they're obviously doing big things with Riyadh season, a lot of money. Again, we can kind of perhaps, if this gets confirmed, get into the moral equation of all that, the alleged sort of sports washing aspect to it all. But they've got Riyadh season, haven't they, where that kind of runs from October to March time. They've got a lot of big sporting events. And so does United doing some kind of friendly in Saudi Arabia fit in with that? I'm sure it would be pretty lucrative. They haven't got any flights. I mean, last season they flew to European destinations 8 times, I think it was, obviously with a view to get into a bit of silverware at the end of it. So this would clearly be a commercial endeavour. Maybe you could sort of claim there's some benefit, warm weather to it. But I think also there would be criticism, wouldn't there? Because you've had Ruben Amorim speak pretty clearly about the benefits of having 3 midweeks to train at Carrington, and so this would perhaps come as a speed bump to that. Notwithstanding, maybe there's some benefit to playing a match to kind of keep people's sharpness there. But I don't know, it's an interesting one, right? Like there's lots of different ways this could be taken, and it's still in its early stages, so I wouldn't sort of say it's definitely going to happen at all, but it's certainly something that they're looking into.
Carl, what do you think about the premise of a mid-season friendly, and specifically in this season that so far hasn't gone as Manchester United would hope?
Mostly uneasy, given what Laurie's just spoken about, how Amorim has spoken at length, even before the Europa League final, about the possibility of having more training time at Carrington to work with his team. I think this would be somewhat of a disruption, and the main benefit of these sorts of friendlies are financially based. So Manchester United have done multiple things for money, not just in recent times, but throughout their history. They did a post-season tour, and we know the main reason for that was financial as well. But I think this one would run just a little bit it caused friction with what Ruben Amorim has said he wants to do with his squad. So I'm not a fan of it personally, but it's early days, so we'll see what happens next.
Yeah, The Athletic's Chris Witherspoon will be joining us in a moment to talk about the finances at United. He's written on The Athletic this week about how much it's cost the club to change managers over time, to look at the feasibility of questioning the future of Ruben Amorim from a financial point of view. So we'll talk about that in a moment. But Andy, whichever way you look at it, because of that lack of European football, there is a huge hole in United's finances this season. And like with the post-season tour last year, they're going to have to try and find ways to boost the revenues to be able to afford the type of work that the first team squad still needs.
Yeah, I spoke to someone at the club who said to me, we would be stupid not to. I wouldn't be surprised if there was more than one friendly. I think one way it could be framed is warm weather training. If you go to the Middle East in January, for example, the facilities are good there. The facilities will be good in Saudi. I appreciate the other issues as well, but the money will talk. I was in Milan for the last podcast and speaking to AC Milan people. They've also not got European football. They're also in the market. And I was also speaking to someone who absolutely knows, who said the whole football industry really misses Manchester United. The Champions League, European football, it is a real miss because they're one of the 3 biggest football clubs in the world. So would I be stunned to hear Manchester United are playing somebody like AC Milan, a big club? You're going to get a promoter who's going to stump up good money for it. It's sold as warm weather training, and you'll get some barn pot fans who go to it because they're starved of European football. You know, last time none of us had tickets because no one thought that anyone could even get into the country. David Gill, to be fair to him, sorted everyone out with complimentary tickets, and we got in and we tried to make a bit of a racket. 15 against 60,000, bit of a struggle.
Yeah, I'm just reading a bit more about it. I probably should have done this before I did the podcast, to be fair, so apologies to anyone who'll be angry about this. But Sami Al-Jabbar's testimonial, it was organised by the Saudi royal family. I don't know why I had in my head it was like some game related to United being European champions or, you know, something along those lines. 28th of January, so it was the day after a FA Cup tie against Tottenham. United were in the middle of a 6-game winning run and an even longer unbeaten run. So I guess when results are like that, you can get away with these things. But we'll keep an eye on this, of course. Laurie had the exclusive on this. So yeah, keep your eyes peeled to The Athletic for more on potential friendly plans. Okay, well, we had a lot of feedback. I think maybe the most comments on YouTube, certainly, that we've ever had to the last episode after the Brentford game. And obviously a lot of soul searching has been going on this week across the club, across the fan base. It was so far below, again, what was expected. And obviously that's led to a lot of question marks about exactly what's going on at the moment. Carl, one thing that we did get in response to the last record was people didn't think that we maybe placed enough focus on the role of the players in Manchester United's issues at the moment, and there was too much focus on just the manager. A lot of other people would completely disagree with that and probably wanted us to speak even more about the manager. You were probably the most impassioned on Amorim. Where do you stand on how much of the blame the players should get for the situation at the moment?
The players are not faultless. I know there's going to be a lot of people watching this, listen to this, that will say or believe the players have got rid of more than one Manchester United head coach or manager due to underperformance. You go back to those. If you have the stomach to going back to those, the highlights of the Brentford defeat, there are 2 or 3 defensive errors in the lead up to some of Brentford's goals that are very, very hard to legislate against. The defensive miscommunication between Maguire, De Ligt in that back 3 to allow Brentford's first goal is just one of those mistakes that will have a coach throwing his hands up to the sky. Bayern Deer letting a shot seemingly go through him for the 3rd goal is one of those things that's very hard to legislate against. So, as I said after the Manchester derby, the players are unfortunately prone to brain farts or individual errors at the most inopportune moments. And I feel Amorim, like many of the other Manchester United coaches, unfortunately need to do perhaps extra bits of legwork in order to protect against those mistakes, add safety nets in. If you have individual errors, you need to have a collective safety net. And I don't think that's necessarily happening right now. And I think that is probably causing undue stress on a group of players that have scar tissue or too much undue stress over the last couple of years. So it's a negative feedback loop. Already nervous players that perhaps aren't the quality that Manchester United fans of a certain age are used to, being put in uncommon positions, making mistakes as they're in those uncommon positions, which then makes whatever Ruben Amorim is trying to carry out even worse. How you fix that, I don't know, especially because it seems like Ruben Amorim is not the sort of person with an appetite to try and change or divert from his ideal plan.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of focus again on what he does at Sunderland. We'll preview that in a moment because, again, so much discourse around what needs to change, what he can tweak, and the expectation that maybe he won't change that much because of the way that he's sort of set his stall out on that in previous press conferences and interviews. Andy, we had a question from Mike. He asked, are the players letting Amorim down, in your opinion?
A little bit, yeah. And I think it's fair to criticise them. And I think what Carl said is fair. You can't legislate for Bruno Fernandes missing a penalty every time he goes to play in silence in West London, or poor individual performances. Luke Shaw held his hands up after the Manchester Derby game, after Roy Keane had criticised him. He didn't play well. We're at the games. We know what we're seeing with our own eyes. We can tell when someone's playing well. When we say things like Matthias de Ligt has been Manchester United's best defender, it's because he's been the best defender. When we have concerns about the goalkeeping area, it's because sloppy goals are being conceded. I looked up at Brentford and saw that ball going over and just thought, oh no, it was just a horrible goal to concede. Not saying it was like that goal in Istanbul a couple of years ago.
I knew you were going to say Başakşehir.
Yeah. I mean, that was even worse. Oh no, this can't happen. And then Brentford get another one and the game's gone then because you try to come down from 2-0. So I think we've been pretty fair critiquing the players. I think the focus is on the manager because he chooses the tactics, he chooses the system. I think that'd be the same at any football club in the world. But you ask us about any player, we always give you an honest answer. And Carl's point about the negative loop is really true. You know, if you're confident and you're doing well, then things tend to come off. If you're not, then the opposite is true. And you can feel whenever there is a confidence among the United players, it's still a fragile one. The fans don't really trust the team. They don't really trust the manager. They want to. They're desperate to. And then when the team fall behind, the tension just seeps in. Or when the team are playing really well or leading a game, the confidence grows a little bit. You know, Chelsea going down to 10 really gave the crowd a big boost. Manchester United having a 2-goal cushion, and your default is surely we can't throw away a 2-goal cushion. So it gives a little bit of confidence there. So these all play into factors, but when someone plays well or plays badly, we'll always say that. That's our job.
Yeah, Laurie, I mean, the situation at the moment doesn't have the same feel as maybe when Manchester United have approached a problem with a manager in the past. The types of stories, whether it's speculation or whether it's, you know, stuff seeping out from the dressing room, there tends to be he's lost the dressing room line, or, you know, people are turning against him, or, you know, whatever it might be. It doesn't really feel like, despite the question mark over what's happening at the moment, that we're at that stage in the relationship between the players and Ruben Amorim. And even from the club as well, that there's not been much this week, but there has been little bits here and there that there's still a full support for Ruben Amorim. So those two things combined suggest that this is not the end game. But then on the other hand, there'll be a lot of people who would suggest that if United have a bad result and a bad performance again against Sunderland heading into an international break, then that would be a time where there would be the potential to change. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it is a big match. I certainly think that Ruben Amorim needs a positive result from it. They need to beat Sunderland, don't they? Sunderland have actually been pretty good so far this season. I still think, from speaking to people, even if they lost to Sunderland, I don't think that would be the end for Ruben Amorim. Speaking to people this week and sort of getting the same kind of information as that what else has been reported, you know, Sir Jim Ratcliffe is the ultimate decision maker on this, really. I know that he would, you know, take recommendations from Omar Barada and Jason Wilcox, and the Glazers certainly have a voice on this as well. Joel Glazer in particular, I imagine, will have an opinion. But Ratcliffe is the one to decide, I think, really, and he, I'm told, wants to actually give Amorim the full season because it's a, you know, new squad to a degree. It's, you know, him trying to get his methods across even more. So, yeah, we can debate whether that's the right choice or not, but that's the current messaging anyway from the very top with Sir Jim Ratcliffe. And so then you do get into all those other elements of, well, okay, how can he turn it round, or how can this just become more of an acceptable situation for United? Clearly, European football is a big sort of marker for them to achieve this season. I take your point certainly in terms of you know, not losing the dressing room, but you're always going to get different opinions amongst players. I mean, just look at Kobbie Mainoo, who asked to leave before the end of the transfer window, still not getting start. So you can imagine his thoughts on the situation. I'm sure there's players that are wondering whether this is the right system to be playing in, to Carl's point about them being put in, probably more unfamiliar positions, even though they've all got different experience of this kind of system at various points in their careers. So yeah, it's certainly going to be, I think, still a sort of turbulent, few weeks, whatever happens. But clearly, you are getting to a kind of game by game situation where people are going to have opinions. Ultimately, so far, the club are saying that they're taking the long-term view on Ruben Amorim and won't be swayed by those 90-minute matches in isolation, that they understand, as we've touched on before, perhaps some of the data that is suggesting improvements. Again, we can question that a little bit, but yeah, there doesn't feel like at this exact moment, and I'm sure there's some thoughts around what would they do if they had to change. I'm sure they're looking at other, in terms of just their own minds, other managers that are out there. But as far as I'm aware, the backing is there for Amorim. They're with him and they want to support him through this.
Okay, there's questions everywhere. There's not enough answers, and that's what the team and the manager have to find over the next few weeks. But Laurie, we're going to leave it there with you. So thank you very much for being with us on Talk of the Devils, as always, my friend.
Thanks, guys. Cheers. Have a lovely rest of the show.
Okay, well, that's Laurie gone, but we have a new guest joining us to talk about the finances involved in Manchester United's managerial changes over the years. Chris Witherspoon's written about it on The Athletic. Chris, the report has gone absolutely everywhere. People have been digesting all the different figures involved in this, but fundamentally, it's cost Manchester United 55 million quid since Sir Alex Ferguson departed to change managers and to change the staff associated with it as well. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much. I think at least that we don't know how much Ralph Rangnick saw, because he went in the same financial year as Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. But the good thing for people like me about Manchester United being listed is that they provide quarterly updates. So in the quarter that Rangnick went, there was a big jump in kind of termination payments and that. But I think the club briefed at the time that wasn't all to him and his staff. It's not clear who exactly it went to. And I don't think it would be strange if he'd got a big amount. But yeah, I think at least 55 million is your kind of headline figure. And that's since Sir Alex Ferguson retired.
Yeah, it sounds like a big number, but it is over quite a long period of time. And actually, the article places it in context with the revenues at United during that time. And it's less than 1%. So is it unusual to have spent that much money on it? Does it really tell us that much about how Manchester United have operated, or does it compare to other clubs similarly?
I think it can be a few things. I mean, for United, comparative to the previous 27 years, it is unusual, but
yes.
Since then,
there's quite a big reason for that.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, since then, I guess, yeah. I mean, in context, like we say, yeah, it's less than 1% of revenue. United can stomach it. I think the point I also tried to make though is that at this moment in time, right now, even if comparatively, it's a small proportion in that. United have obviously got a big focus on costs and savings, and so any unwanted costs, like doing it again, it just feels like they bear more weight. I think in terms of kind of comparison to other clubs, I mean, Chelsea are kind of the poster boy for this. And basically, I could just be inferring wrongly here, but the reason we know how much United have spent on these costs is that in the accounts they put them as what's called an exceptional item, because you kind of say, well, this doesn't always happen, so we'll highlight it as a one-off. So Chelsea used to do that, and either they decided they just don't want to tell us, or it's now become so commonplace that it's no longer a one-off because they don't disclose. They don't disclose it anymore. But I mean, I was having a look just before it came on, and Chelsea since the Abramovich takeover, I think you're on for about 125 million in terms of manager sacking costs, which is a big amount. Obviously, it's over a longer time period than what we talked about. It's probably double the time period, a little over double the amount. So are United exceptional in that regard? No. But I think Yeah, I think it's in the context of where we're at. And I think, and actually the article didn't say this, but the point around like Ten Hag was they gave him a contract 4 months before getting rid of him. Like that just looks like nonsensical now, because that obviously added to the amount they would have to pay him off with. And yeah, and I think as well, obviously I comment on the financial side of things, but if they were to do it again, there's a reputational cost really, because it feels, look, I don't watch United anywhere near as closely as you guys do, but it feels like they've kind of hitched their wagon to Amorim and said, no, he's the guy we're going to stick with. And then if they turn around and, balk at that, it's not just the finances. United can probably afford it. They have cash reserves. They have access to cash that they could pull down on if they needed to. But I think the issue is probably broader than that.
Yeah, another interesting aspect to the article, Andy, was that Chris wrote that when Manchester United sacked Jose Mourinho, I mean, the cost is exceptional in his case. It's around 20 million quid to him and his staff to make that change. But in the year that Jose went, in the year that Louis van Gaal went, in the year that David Moyes went, Manchester United still made a profit despite making the changes. And that includes, obviously, all the money that was spent on making those switches in the dugout. When Erik ten Hag left and now throwing this forward to potentially Ruben Amorim moving on at some point during this financial year even, there's a much bigger question mark about whether Manchester United would still make a profit. They certainly didn't when Erik ten Hag left. So when we are talking about the post-season tours being a thing that might become more common, when we are talking about the prospect of mid-season friendly matches in far-flung places as well, the finances probably are more of a consideration now, aren't they, than they've ever been before?
Absolutely. As Chris said, there's the reputational cost. There's also the financial cost. And you can do without a 10 million bill, more or less, depending on the size of the contract. Each time a manager gets sacked, that 10 million will pay the wages of a top-level footballer for 1 year. I know one player who now plays for Manchester United, and it's the outcome, but I want 10 million a year, and he was signed. So there's also a cost of when a new manager comes in, it's not unnatural for them to want their own players, and they tend to cost hundreds of millions. It's not just
and their own staff as well. You've got more,
and their own staff.
The manager could be under contract too, like with Amorim's case, where United have to pay tens of millions to get him and his staff in as well.
Yeah, and it would be even worse if Rui Faria was Jose Mourinho's assistant. He decided to go his own decision in the summer of 2018. So he didn't need paying off, but the example with Erik ten Hag's contract is a really important one. I get why the club do it. It's like, no, we're going to calm down the speculation. We absolutely believe in Erik ten Hag. And I believe at the time the contract was signed, they did, and the fans did, but football is a results business and results can change the mood very quickly. And Chris, as a Sunderland fan, probably knows that more than anyone. He's seen his team, a huge team, 9th best supported team in England at the moment. They've always been a huge club. I've always respected them, but go down to the 3rd tier and still attract huge crowds. And at one point, Sunderland were changing managers every 6 to 7 minutes, and there was that TV programme where I'll never forget the guy with the Ibiza soundtrack try to get them the people motivated. But going back 20 years, a lad I know was doing Spanish classes with, he was a captain of Barca B, and he wasn't going to get in Barca's first team because he had Xavi Hernandez ahead of him and Andres Iniesta and Sergio Busquets. And he said, I want you to be my agent. I said, I don't want to be your agent, I want to be your mate. But I'll put him onto an agent. And the agent came back and said, I've got 3 offers for you: Sunderland, Southampton and Hearts. And my mate said, where should I go? I said, by a mile, Sunderland. And he went up to Sunderland. He was that good. Within a day, they offered him a 3-year contract. And I took him up there and made sure he was fine. And we watched the game. And I said, just enjoy being anonymous in Sunderland, because when you sign tomorrow, your life in this goldfish bowl, you're going to be anything but anonymous. And I took him in the singing section in the Stadium of Light. And then after the game, I took him in a working men's club in Roca, near where the old ground was. And he heard these 3 fellas going, I'm not going to try a Sunderland accent, but Chris probably help me.
Don't offend Chris, yeah, please.
This guy coming from Barcelona, I've heard he's better than Messi. They were so excited. And I had this moment where I turned to him and said, excuse me, I'm not being rude, I don't want to interrupt, but the guy who's signed from Barcelona is actually him sat next to me. I'd like you to meet him. And it was just a lovely, innocent moment where, whoa, because footballers didn't tend to go and work in men's clubs. And then he signed, he played man of the match in his first game, so he actually was better than Messi. Then Roy Keane came in, didn't fancy him, bombed him out. He was at Falkirk a year later.
Who was it?
It's called Arnau Riera. I'm still very close friends with him. Lovely
I remember
boy.
him. I remember him. He came. He was Niall Quinn. Niall Quinn had just taken over.
Quinny signed him on a 3-year contract.
Yeah, he took over as chairman. Then they couldn't get anyone to take over as manager. So Quinny went, "Oh well, I'll just do that." And then we lost the first 4 games or something. And that was when they got Keane in.
So Sunderland have a really good fanzine, I Love Supreme, and I love it that Sunderland have got a good printed fanzine. And I've known their editors for decades. And at Southend away, they messaged me and gone, whoa, your mate, he's absolutely brilliant. And he was man of the match, And then in his next game, he started. So I sent my little brother up to watch him bury away in the League Cup. And got sent off after 3 minutes.
Got sent off, yeah.
That's good, yeah. Well, speaking of strong starts, it seems like a good link to talk about the way that Sunderland have started this season, Chris, because obviously having you on to talk finances has been great, but to get a little bit of an insight into what Manchester United can expect meeting your team at the weekend, how surprised have you been by the start? It's maybe the place to start.
Yeah, well, I mean, given our usual Premier League record, very. I think the caveat is like actually when the fixtures came out, we kind of looked and thought, actually we've got a really good chance of getting off to a good start. And I don't want to sound negative or anything, but in a way, kind of had to, because if you look at Sunderland's fixtures next month in December, and mid-November through to mid-December, they're really not very nice. And I think if we didn't have points on the board now, you'd be really struggling. But obviously they do. They've got it's the most points they've had at this stage in a top flight season since I think it's 1967, which is quite a while ago. And yeah, no, they've been to be honest, probably the more surprising thing is that actually at the start of the window when they were signing quite a lot of players and they were spending quite a lot of money, certainly for Sunderland, they were signing mostly kind of midfielders and attack-minded players. But actually, and the concern right up until about 10 days before the season started was, we don't have much of a Premier League ready defence. But actually the most impressive thing has been the defence. They got a few defenders in just before the season kicked off, and they've really hit the ground running. They got a new goalkeeper in who has looked nothing short of brilliant. Actually, he's really, really good. He conceded a goal against Villa, which I'm gonna give him the benefit of the doubt and say the sun was in his eyes, because other than that, he has been really, really good. And so I think that's been the biggest surprise. And yeah, because I mean, we all know like there's a huge gulf, and I think I don't think many fans were expecting Sunderland to get promoted last season. I don't know that the club were. So really, when you come up like that, you're kind of thinking, oh God, we're even further behind than everyone else is going to be. So it's been a pleasant surprise.
Chris, can you tell me a little bit more about your manager? He's not as well known to other Premier League fans as Scott Parker and Daniel Farke at Leeds, but just anecdotally from watching Match Today post-match, he seems to be talking about solutions and connections a lot. Yeah,
he's very how do I word this? Thoughtful.
Careful.
Thoughtful. You know what? When we hired him, he had just left Lorient, who had just been relegated, and at the time, Sunderland had just gotten over an interesting experiment with Michael Beale, which didn't go particularly well, and they took something like 3 months to hire the manager. And by this point, everyone in the fan base was like, they don't know what they're doing, what on earth's going on, we've got more chance of getting relegated than get promoted and all this. And he came in, and I remember prior to joining the Athletic, I did a podcast, and we got someone on who knew French football, and they basically told us that, he might be exciting going forward, but he doesn't really know how to set a defence up. And we were like, oh. And actually the exact opposite has been true. He's been really solid. They won 9 of his first 12 games, I think, at the Championship last season. And yeah, I think the easy criticism of managers is that they don't know how to change things in game. And he got that for quite a while. But then actually, as the season progressed, we started to see that change a bit, never more so than in the playoff final last year. And I think, he's very, like I say, he's very thoughtful, quite grounded, and he's put a kind of priority on getting things solid defensively. I would say probably the biggest concern so far is, despite the relatively easy start, I'm not going to say it's been all easy. I mean, we played Palace, Villa and Forest, who last season would have been quite a difficult run of fixtures. I know it's a little bit different this year, but we still haven't created very much. But they've got a solid base to build from. The two centre-halves who came in just before the season started have been excellent. We've got a lad called Nordi Mukeli, I think, from PSG, who might now be my favourite player ever, because I don't think I've ever seen someone so enthusiastic about the art of defending. Yeah, he just loves defending. Like, you can just tell. So the manager's got them organised, and obviously the signing of a certain Swiss midfielder has helped as well.
Yeah, Granit Xhaka has fitted right in. There's no question about that. And you have as well on the podcast, Chris. So thank you so much for being on with us. It was great to get your insight on the numbers and a little bit on Sunderland as well. Thank you.
Cheers, lads.
Excellent. Right. Well, let's preview the weekend's game for Manchester United. The opening question goes to you, Andy, if that's okay. Is this the most crucial match of Amorim's tenure so far?
Yes, it's huge, but Brentford was huge, Ian. Chelsea was huge. Burnley was huge, partly because what we said right back when we didn't qualify for Europe, if you're not winning and the mood is restless, then these weeks will be extremely long. And look at what happened after the Sunderland game. You've got an international break. So that would be 2 extremely long weeks if Manchester United were to not win the game. And Sunderland are a decent side. They've surprised me. As Chris said, it was a surprise that they came up. And Carl's drum rolling because I'm saying they're a decent side.
Oh, dear.
But I have actually watched them. They're lost.
If they've got the
Good
Andy Mitten
bench.
stamp, decent side.
I couldn't see them staying up, Carl, this season. But I'm not watching them every week. And then I did watch them. I thought they've got a really interesting bench. They've obviously gone out. They brought a young Catalan striker off the bench, Marc Guiu, who's from Chelsea. And
Still at Chelsea. He's gone back now.
Has he?
Yeah.
He came off the bench 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, it's Chelsea.
Yeah, he went back. Yeah. When Jackson went to Bayern Munich.
Obviously, you can see that I'm not a Sunderland correspondent here. I thought he looks lively. I mean, Granit Xhaka's their best player. I really like the way they looked after Ahmad. I really didn't like the way they did the Poznan when City won the league in 2012. But this weekend is a huge game for Manchester United and a difficult game as well. We saw the Burnley game. I think there are a lot of parallels with this. I think Manchester United do have the quality to go out and dominate. It's what happens next. I think United will come flying out the traps because that's what the team have been doing. What happens if Sunderland get a goal? What happened when Burnley got a goal? It starts to wobble badly for all the points that we've been mentioning before. I think that Ruben Amorim has lost most Manchester United fans now. I still think there are people who would love it for him to work out. They simply don't think that it will, but they're not the people who are making the decision. And even now, if you started winning all the time, we'd be like, okay, I've got all my hands up, I was wrong. But at the moment, which plays into your question, I think his stock is lower than it's ever been. I don't think United fans want to punish him. I think they think he's a decent human, but there's very little faith. No, would either of you two be stunned if Manchester United didn't win at Old Trafford on Saturday?
We should be, but no. And that's the problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like I said with Brentford. You go into the game with all this expectation and you think, something to build on after Chelsea and all the things you hear behind the scenes, it's positive, and then the game kicks off and they're 2-0 down after 19 minutes, and you should be surprised, but you're not. And that's the sort of remnants of recent times for the team, for us, for the whole environment around it. You said about flying out of the traps earlier. That's definitely something that they've tried to do at the start of this season in games. It's not always worked. And I guess a big reason for that is this stat. So since Amorim's first match in charge in the Premier League in November 2024, no team has conceded the first goal in more Premier League games than Manchester United. It's happened 21 times. And Nick got in touch to tell us that. We've checked it. It's true. And Carl, United haven't won a game in the Premier League after going behind since Ipswich at home, which was a 3-2 victory in February. That shows how important the first goal is.
Yeah. And I think Andy spoke about this sort of stun and shock in that United can play well, but there is always this sort of trepidation that United will play well for 10 minutes, miss a chance or two, and then you're going, oh God, if they don't score quickly, the reverse momentum is going to kick in. The other team will wander down or get a corner kick and they'll score in their first opportunity. So the mood drops and the mood swings massively on the first goal in recent matches under Amorim. So yeah, really, really important. Start strong, come out of the blocks. I mean, even watching the Brentford game, I was getting nervous when it was a corner kick or a throw-in, which I shouldn't be that nervous playing, quote unquote, a smaller team in the Premier League whenever they get a set piece, but this is where we are now. So you want a strong start, you want an early goal. Hopefully it goes to one of your brand new front three as well, so you can build up some momentum for them too, and then you take it from there.
Yeah, that's the plan, isn't it? It's been another week though, Carl, hasn't it, where, like I've said a few times already on the show, where people have questioned the style of play, they've questioned the formation, they've asked what can Amorim change, what can Amorim tweak, what can be different about this Sunderland game. And we had a lot of questions coming in, specifically the comparison with Crystal Palace. So Oliver Glasner, still the only unbeaten manager in the Premier League so far this season, plays a very similar, on paper at least, system to Ruben Amorim in the Premier League, and there's no questions about whether it's working for him. Our Red Devils, which is our Reddit channel that we've jumped on board with, a lot of Manchester United fans on there, a very active community, so thank you again to all of you for your questions. Not Tim Duncan has asked, can you explain the comparison between Glasner and Amorim's systems, Carl, and also what makes them different? Why is one working better than the other? Jason, also on email, asked the same question.
It's a great question, and one that I went to our friend Ahmed in our tactics department at The Athletic to get an answer to. We might write an article on it over the international break if there's a great appetite for it. But Ahmed's analysis, which I've got on my phone, is absolutely brilliant. He says that there's differences in possession and out of possession. So in possession, one of the differences is the Crystal Palace, the middle centre-back doesn't push up as much as we've seen in the past with Maguire and De Ligt. He says in terms of progressing the ball, he thinks the central midfielders at Crystal Palace are superior at hitting those long balls into the channels and getting the ball forward quickly. So, I mean, it's no coincidence that Manchester United have been flutting their eyelashes at Adam Wharton more than once, because that's the sort of central midfielder you ideally sort of want in this sort of system, because a 3-4-3, you ideally want to play quickly and you ideally want to be able to play the ball between the lines in an opportune manner. I think Mateta is more of a bulldozer style centre forward. You can make the ball stick in the final third to a far superior degree than Rasmus Højlund did last season, and the jury's still out on Šeško. The sample size is just not big enough for me to say Šeško's good or bad or not. And also, the wing backs at Crystal Palace are just better in the final third than the wing-back offering that you've got at Manchester United. So those are some differences simply in possession. Ahmed has also explained a lot to me about the differences out of possession. He's also written a really, really good piece on The Athletic about Manchester United's out of possession problems, because they are trying to play in a 5-2-3 shape when they don't have the ball for the majority of the time. It does change depending on what phase you're in or where the opposition has the ball. But his succinct analysis is Oliver Glasner's got Crystal Palace to become a very resolute and solid defensive unit when they don't have the ball, whereas Manchester United's out of possession scheme is. So there's that. If you are interested in more about this, I would recommend Adam Cleary on YouTube. He's done a great video on what makes Crystal Palace really work, and Harrison over at the Overlap Breakdown. He's also done a great video on Crystal Palace. But the short answer is Crystal Palace have more complementary players to make a 3-4-3 work. Glasner as a coach has had two or three different tactical tweaks compared to what Ruben Amorim wants. And also within games, it seems like Glasner at the moment has just a better feel for what adjustments need to be made in a game. Whereas at the moment, Amorim's sort of big roll of the dice is emergency centre forward Harry Maguire and other things like that. So differences in players, superior execution from Crystal Palace and Glasner right now just seems to have a better feel for the Premier League.
Yeah, and confidence in the group, I'm sure, which will help, which has built over time and comes with, successful spells of form, winning trophies, and obviously they've made a good start to this season as well. Just looking back at Manchester United then, Andy, you mentioned Ahmad before, who had a brilliant loan spell at Sunderland. I know the Sunderland supporters still speak very fondly about him. He's back in training after compassionate leave. There's a question about whether Lenny Yoro comes back in, whether Casemiro comes in, and what happens with the goalkeeper for Manchester United as well. Is it time for Senne Lammens to come in and be the Manchester United number one now? What do you think changes for this Sunderland game, if anything?
If Ahmad can come in, I think that would excite Manchester United fans. I think Lammens has been brought with the intention of being Manchester United's number one goalkeeper. It will just take time for him to get to that point.
Is now the time?
I'm not seeing him in training every day. I'll try and find the answer out to that. I'll try and find out who won the FA Cup and the Community Shield in 2025. But it's Palace, wasn't it? You were just talking about them then. They beat Liverpool, they beat City. Tough game, Ian. You know Sunderland spent more money in the close season than any football club in the world, apart from Real Madrid, outside the Premier League. So this is what you're dealing with. They spent 160 million.
I've seen this stat go around, and it's one of those.
Is this net spend? Because surely Liverpool spent more, didn't they?
Outside the Premier League, Liverpool spent the most.
Outside the Premier League.
Oh, sorry, outside the Premier League.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So this is a stat that's been going around a lot.
They've gone for it though, Carl, haven't they? And they've completely gone for it to stay up, and whether it'll pay off. Palace. I know people at Palace, and the mood there in the summer was not good because they weren't spending anybody. You had a frustrated manager there. You had other clubs going in for their players. I know some of them. I've spoken to some of the sporting directors. Even though Palace are on this really good run with a good manager, it was not harmonious there in the season because they were offering a bag of peanuts for a player and stuff like that. And then they've started brilliantly because they've obviously got a manager who's working for them. Sunderland are going for it, and they're not the first team to come up who are going for it. Leeds spent 100 million. Burnley spent 90 million. Something Scott McTominay said to me on Sunday was the difference between Serie A and the Premier League is every single club in the Premier League is really, really, really strong. And that's why we're nervous going into a game. And fans don't always see it like that because they're not watching the lower end of La Liga or the lower end of Serie A or the Bundesliga. But unfortunately, we've seen from Manchester United results there is strength in every single club. And that adds jeopardy, which makes the league so attractive, and jeopardy, which makes us so nervous ahead of Sunderland coming to Old Trafford. It's not 1995 anymore, where Sunderland would come and are buying £3 million for players. They can go to top clubs and bring really good players in. They're not bringing Lamine Yamal in, but they're bringing in really good players. And it makes them very, very dangerous, as they're proving.
Yeah, I mean, Sunderland's record at United is not good, whichever way you cut it, to be honest. They've won once in the league at Old Trafford since 1968. That was in 2014 when Ryan Giggs was in caretaker charge at the end of David Moyes' season in charge, although they did win on penalties, Sunderland, in the League Cup in that same season in the semi-final at Old Trafford after losing the game after extra time, that second leg. So they've not got many happy memories coming to Old Trafford. I mean, Carl, just to finish really, I mean, something's got to change, hasn't it? Do you think there is a change coming on the team sheet that then can initiate a change in the result? Because it cannot be another lacklustre display, can it?
It can. I'm sorry.
All right, Mick.
I'm sorry. You teed me up for that one. I think one of the frustrations or bits of confusion here is that we keep using the word change. We go, what can we change? What has to change? What can we change? And one of the problem, the big sort of immovable rock or big elephant in the room is Ruben Amorim does not want to change too much. So we can change the goalkeeper, or we can change the central midfielder next to Bruno Fernandes, but Manchester United are going to play the same way against Sunderland that they did against Brentford, that they did against Chelsea, and that they did against Fulham, Burnley, everyone else. It's going to be 3-4-2-1. They're going to play a 5-2-3. They are going to try and bait the press and then hit the ball long into the channels, hopefully get the ball to stick. And if that fast attack's good, hopefully someone can pop up and score a goal. Maybe there's a little bit of variation and you can get the ball, if you hit the right switch, you can get the ball to the free wing back at the back post, something you should maybe keep an eye out for Dorgu. But that's how Manchester United are going to play in the broadest strokes. And the question now is that going to work against Hunt? And I can't tell you. I can't tell you if when the ball gets through and Cunha's in space, is that shot going to go in or is the goalkeeper going to make a save? Because we are now on dice rolls, coin tosses, whatever gambling talk you want to do.
They're on the biggest XG underachievement in the Premier League, though, aren't they? And that's not just Bruno Fernandes' penalty misses, which contribute obviously a proportion of it, but they have underperformed their XG based on the chances they've created more than anyone else. So it is that last bit that actually would make a huge difference.
Yes, and XG underperformance is one of those, particularly when the sample size is too small. This is a really tricky one because you can look at those XG underperformance numbers and you can go, is that bad luck? Is that player in a bad form? Is that, in a very small sense, let's look at Bruno Fernandes on penalties. Is Bruno Fernandes failing to score his penalties because he's just in a rotten form of luck? Or is he missing his penalties because two of those penalties have had a massive pause or some sort of last minute distraction before he takes them? Is that likely to happen again? Can you solve that by taking penalties away from Bruno Fernandes? And it's all these sort of almost like a guess who, knock, 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 knock. But the answer is the thing I can't really give you too much encouragement about is because we know Ruben Amorim so far wants to play in a very particular way that has historically, in the Premier League at least, had limited success. There's only so many positive bits of information I can give you in that, okay, maybe Senne Lammens comes in for buying there. I can't tell you right now with any confidence if Lammens is going to be an instant fix, because 2 or 3 times watching footage of him in Belgium, you're going, okay, you're coming out to punch crosses and claim those crosses, and I need to see how that's going to adjust to Premier League opposition. Or he likes to shoot off his line when he sees a Belgian attacker take a heavy touch. There's going to be fewer players in the Premier League that take a heavy touch. Is that going to adjust? Or if you put in Casemiro from Manu Ugarte, okay, you're going to get greater long passes into those channels, but it's 33-year-old Casemiro, so you might do a silly mistake and get yourself a yellow card and or a free kick in a dangerous area for someone. And this is why it feels quite circuitous, and I'm really sorry for anyone listening to this podcast going, just get to the point. I can't get to the point because the point is Ruben Amorim isn't going to change, so there's only a limited amount of things that can be done.
I think he will start to change when he starts getting wins, but he might run out of road before that point. Mm-hmm. I think he's not going to compromise. They are training well, and I speak to lots of people there. I spoke to a couple of sports directors in Italy this week who both were very complimentary about Lammens as a goalkeeper. So the word in their industry, which is obviously the industry, that's the decision-making industry, one of them said, you've got a good one there, but I think it might take time for him. So if they're training well, and if they're seeing things in training which are breathtaking, that's all great. But what happens in training doesn't set the mood. It's the results of the football match. The only thing true to form is that a storm's predicted at Old Trafford, just like at the Chelsea game. So you have these 2 weeks of absolute sunshine, and then it just absolutely lags it down. I'm still sore after Chelsea, mate. You know.
Yeah, I can imagine you're still soggy. Still soggy.
Yeah. The most optimistic part of me would love to see a good performance, a convincing win. It would absolutely lift the mood. You're absolutely right about the wild swings. Doesn't help anybody. It's a massive concern. Comes from the media. It comes from fans. It comes even within matches where you've got the believers who are desperate for it to come true, and then you've got people who've just given up. And I told you so. This man is not the right man to be coaching Manchester United. And until there is a sustained run, Manchester United move up the table, this is going to be life at Manchester United, and it's not helping people. And as Laurie said earlier on, what's the mood like in the dressing room? It does depend on who you ask, and it's only natural if the team are winning that there's more happiness. Then, if you're a benched player, you're not going to be delighted, are you? There's just normal human reactions. Back to your point, it's a massive game. They all are.
Yeah, it certainly is. Right, let's leave it there on Talk of the Devils. Carl and Andy, thank you for your company as always. Thank you, Carl, over there. It's been an unusual existence for us, but there you go. Thank you to Chris and Laurie for coming on earlier on as well. The kitchen staff are just getting stuff sorted if you heard a clank in the background, so it's our time to depart. But thank you for your company as well. We'll speak to you after Sunderland, whatever happens. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching this episode of Talk of the Devils. Don't forget to hit subscribe if you've not done already. Like the video and also get involved in the comments too, and click the bell to make sure that you never miss an episode with myself, Andy Mitten, Carl Anker and Laurie Whitwell. There's also our social channels at TOT Devils on Instagram, X and TikTok. Thanks for watching.